From the WNIN Tri-State Public Media Center in downtown Evansville, I'm David James, and this is 2 Main Street. My guest is a long-distance running icon, an Olympian who competed for her homeland of New Zealand, a world record setter, and considered the first woman to become a professional runner, paving the way for other female athletes to get a paycheck along with the guys. Now she's an inspirational speaker, a naturalized U.S. citizen living in the Tri-State in Evansville, and founder of one of the most successful road races in the country. The Anne Audain story begins with a little girl born to run despite a foot deformity, but her uncommon heart propelled her to become a world-class runner. Pleased to welcome Anne Audain back to 2 Main Street because Anne has now been inducted into the Museum of World Athletics. So, Anne, congratulations.
Thank you so much, David.
So tell us about the Museum of World Athletics. What is that?
Well, it was conceived a few years ago, and it's by the International Athletics Federation, which is now named World Athletics, and it's based in Monaco. And it's a 3-dimensional museum. You have to kind of go on and check it out. So what they ask you is for about 3 items from your memorabilia. They try to focus on one aspect of your career. And for me, it started with the world record, and they asked me if I had my world record shoes, and I don't. I don't know why I don't, and I wouldn't know where.
Well, that's back in 1982.
It was. So, yeah, I don't know where they are.
You didn't bronze them.
No, I mean, and so then I thought, then they started to ask about the road racing career here in the United States. And in the 80s, I was the most successful road racer, male or female, in the world, with 75 wins out of 112 starts. So they focused on that, and then they asked if I had a trophy that was kind of spectacular. Well, I actually did from the Peachtree Road Race in Atlanta, Georgia, which is held every year on the 4th of July, one of the biggest in the nation. 60,000, I think, participate now. And it was stunning because it's run on Peachtree Boulevard. And this trophy is just got these it's like a stained glass trophy. And it just shows the boulevard with these peaches on it. Mm-hmm. And, I mean, you're parting with something that's really cool, but what are you ever going to do with them anyway? I've got so many amazing trophies. So anyway, I still had the number I ran in to win that race. So it was the trophy, it was the number, and then my custom-made Nike shoes. I still had a couple of pairs of those left, so I autographed them. Those were the 3 main pieces, and then they wanted a whole bunch of photographs. So what they actually do is they create a 3D display so that when you go online, you can walk through this museum and see these 3-dimensional displays. They just took interviews and stories and newspaper articles from all those years, and they really wrote it really, really well. I don't know, it was really well done.
So you approve of what they came up with?
I do, and they never showed me ahead of time.
That's kind of scary.
It is, and I was stunned. They just did such an amazing job.
Wonderful,
so, yeah,
wonderful.
I'm really thrilled because I think it's a nice completion of a career.
Why is it based in Monaco?
I have no idea. It could be money based. I mean, sponsorships coming out of there. Mm-hmm. It costs a lot to create these 3D displays. Mm-hmm. It could honestly just be money based. I think the World Athletics is. I don't think World Athletics is based in Monaco. And let me think about the address. Mm-hmm. I sent it.
Have you ever raced in Monaco?
No, but they do have a big Diamond League track meet there.
Well, no, I've been to Monaco, and a lot of hills in Monaco.
Yes.
Of course, they have the auto races in there, too.
Yes.
Definitely. Okay, these custom-made Nike shoes, tell me about those.
Well, when I first came I'll backtrack in terms of my history with my feet. After I'd had the surgery done at age 13 and decided I wanted to join a running club, the doctors told me to run in the nearest thing possible to bare feet to make sure they were being used correctly, not to put over protection on my feet. Well, the beauty of New Zealand was we had grass tracks, so I could run barefoot still. So shoes were not my friends through all those early years in childhood. And so now to start to put shoes on my feet, I wasn't really keen on that anyway. So after 11 years in New Zealand, I came to the United States, and I was still running in little cross-country shoes, very, very lightweight shoes, and started to run the roads here. And people said, well, you need something more significant on your feet to protect you now running on the roads. And I still didn't like that. And Mary Decker Slaney, who was one of the United States' greatest female runners, she was running in some Nike shoes, and she gave me a pair of her shoes. And so I started to run in Nike shoes here before I even joined with Nike. So once I signed with Nike, which was July of 81, I asked them what kind of shoes they had, and they had a little racer that was nothing to it. And this is before they had the Air sole. So when Nike started promoting their Air, and I didn't like that at all. So once they did that, I asked them if they could just keep continuing to make the same little shoe that I preferred. And they did. For the next 11 years, they made me the same little shoe. And what they did, very smartly, was when they changed their colors each year on their shoes that they were promoting, they made my little shoes the same color. So it looked like I was running in the latest shoe, but I was really running in a 1981 shoe that they kept. It was very clever. And then the other nice thing was they made them in black and white for me, that any time I competed for New Zealand, my shoes were black and white, which is New Zealand's national uniform.
There you go. Now, we talked about this virtual museum. Of course, that's one of the reasons we're talking to you now, getting kind of an update on your long career. This is also the 40th anniversary of your record-setting run in 1982 in the 5,000 meters. That was in Auckland, New Zealand?
Yes.
And tell me about that race, Anne.
Well, 1981, I took the stand here in the United States to turn professional and immediately got an international ban for doing that. And so I went back to New Zealand at the end of 1981, and I was banned from competing in anything in New Zealand. In fact, some officials didn't even want me to attend a track meet as a spectator.
Because you were a paid athlete.
I was a paid athlete now. And so during that time, my coach said to me that I had to have a reason to be still out training, even though I couldn't compete, that there had to be a reason, that I was out there each day. And so he came up with the goal of trying to break the world record in the 5,000 meters. And he just was a great guy and a great coach. And there's great many achievements I have that wouldn't have been if he hadn't have kind of encouraged me to take a try, take a chance at something. So
who is this?
John Davies.
Okay.
He was a New Zealand Olympic bronze medalist himself. And so he said, okay, we're going to attempt the world 5,000 meter record. And I had never raced 5,000 meters on the track before. And I said, oh, I can't do that. I mean, it was a good time, and it was 15 minutes and 14 seconds, which is, I think, about 4 minutes and 45 seconds a mile pace. And this was where I'm just starting with him and just starting to get my confidence back. And I didn't think I could do it. And he says, well, if you do the training, you do the preparation, I think you can. At least we're going to attempt it. And so on March 17th of 1982, we managed to set up a world record attempt. It couldn't be at a track meet. It just had to be a special night, and we had to make sure there were 4 women in the race. There had to be 4 that were willing to be on the track at the same time to make it legal if I broke the record. Then you had to make sure there were timers, 3 timers. This is before all the electronic stuff, So you got the hand timers. You had to make sure that you had some people. There were witnesses. Now, Television New Zealand turned up, so that was really good because at least it was going to be on tape.
Right.
So I went out and and ran the first 5,000-meter race of my career and broke the world record by 1 second. And so my coach proved to me that he knew what he was talking about. And I mean, we went on to have another great 11 years together and a lot of success.
Did you know you were on a world record pace?
I did. Well, there were the other 4, and one of the other gals is a Olympic, caliber as well, Lorraine Moller from New Zealand, and we had agreed to share the pacemaking, 2 laps. It's 2 laps each, and to try and keep on the pace. But every time she took over, she was slowing down too much. So after about 5 laps, I just took over myself, and my coach was, keeping me on. He was telling me what the times were. But with 1 lap to go, I was 5 seconds off.
Oh.
With 1 lap to go. And he's just screaming at me, you got to make up 5 seconds.
My goodness.
And at that point, my mentality is always, I don't want to miss by 1 second.
Oh,
so
yeah.
I hauled it. And I got it by 1 second, but it could have gone the other way.
Now, you've described 1982 as a perfect year for a runner. Unbeaten in road races, setting the course records, and a gold medal in the Commonwealth Games in Brisbane.
Mm-hmm. It's another accomplishment I have, that if it hadn't have been for John pushing me, I would not have even gone. Because through that year, I was really concentrating on the road races here, and as you say, I was completely unbeaten, course records in every race, and I wanted the number 1 ranking. Because I knew if I got to that status, then I could really get a good contract with Nike. So I wanted that number 1 ranking, and John called me up, I don't know, about June of 82, and said, well, I want you need to go and run in the Commonwealth Games in Australia, and they were going to be in October of 82. And I was really done. I mean, I'd got the world record earlier that year, but I was really done with track. I didn't want to run on the track anymore. And he said, you got to do it for your country. No New Zealand woman has ever won a track gold medal. I think you could win a gold medal. Now this, I was going to have to go back down to 3,000 meters. And I just really was running the longer distances. And so I said to him, I finally said yes. Let's do it for your country, do it for your family, do it, just I think you can win a gold medal. So I said yes, as long as I didn't have to quit on any of the road races, that he could send me a program that would allow me to continue running the road races, but go back into some kind of faster work to go back down to 3,000 meters. So that was going to be up to him as a coach to work that out. And I flew down. Now I'm still a banned athlete. The American road race directors were not worrying about the ban. They were allowing me to run anywhere I wanted to. But internationally on the track, I was still a banned athlete. And John was working very, very hard to see if that ban was going to get lifted before I went to Australia. It didn't. I flew down to Australia still as a banned athlete with him guaranteeing me that it would be lifted before I raced. And it was. 1 week before I raced, It was lifted. And they retroactively gave me my world record plaque because they weren't going to acknowledge that either because I was a banned athlete. So, that was exciting, and I was in really good shape, and he was right. I mean...
now, the Commonwealth Games, that's the British Commonwealth.
The British Commonwealth, 72 countries in the British Commonwealth, held every 4 years, and huge. I mean, it's, Canada, all Great Britain, Australia,
South Africa,
many of the African countries, Caribbean, Jamaica, so Canada. I mean, it's huge.
And you also talk about the world's shortest parade?
Shortest parade.
I think in your book you had something about the world's shortest parade after the gold medal win.
Oh, okay. Back in my little suburb of.
When you went back.
When
to
I
New
went
Zealand?
back, yes, I went back to New Zealand, and
with your gold medal.
With my gold medal, I didn't. Now, what I did was, because I had to get back to the United States after that race to run some more road races to try and get that ranking. So I flew through Auckland Airport from Brisbane just to be able to see my parents in the airport in the transit lounge. They opened it up so I could see them. And then I came straight to the United States. So I didn't go back to New Zealand to have some big ticket, tape parade. I came back here to race more. And then I finally went back about November of 82. And my little suburb where I grew up and where my track club was, they got me coming from the airport and they picked me up in a vintage car about a mile from the suburb, and we just drove through a mile with all these young kids from the club running alongside the vintage car, and they just had a little ceremony, but it was kind of cute.
No, of course, your book, and I mentioned Your Uncommon Heart, that's the title of your autobiography. And of course, in the book, we talk about the remarkable uncommon heart of coming back from this foot deformity and the reconstructive surgery and having plaster casts on both feet. And
Yes.
you were a young teenager, weren't you?
13 years of age. So the doctors in New Zealand didn't want to do the surgery until I was a teenager, and my bones were strong enough to be able to handle it and recover from it.
Well, what was your condition when you were born?
They have no idea. They had no name for it. I did get to sit down with the doctor that did the surgery. He was in his early 80s when I sat down with him. And, if people go to my website and the film is on there, he's actually on there talking about it, which was really cool because he validated the situation, because I only have one picture of me with those casts on. And, now when you come forward and you go, look, all that success, it can't have been that bad. And he actually makes the comment on there that it wouldn't have mattered if I was a couch potato, that they would have had to do this to allow me to be able to walk better regardless. So that was nothing to do with athletics. It was just to do with helping me to walk better, because I did not have the heel-toe motion of walking. I slid along on my heels very pigeon-toed. I wouldn't go forward. And it was just like a huge bunions. That's the only way I can describe them for people. And the tendons didn't operate my big
definitely
toes.
Successful surgery.
Mm-hmm. Oh, they were very proud. He was very proud. He traveled. He was became quite a renowned orthopedic surgeon in New Zealand, and he actually traveled to Europe. And he had scrapbooks. He had newspaper cuttings about me that he would show in his presentations in Europe.
Now,
so he was very proud.
When you got those casts off, when did you start running?
Pretty quickly. Now the casts, the picture, I have the casts, and on the bottom of the casts there's a black leather boot that was strapped over those casts, and on the bottom of that black leather boot was a wooden rocker, like a rocking horse. And I kind of say, well, I think I was the first person to have these orthopedic boots that they put everybody in now, but mine were very, just primitive.
Sure.
But they came up with that idea that instead of putting me in a wheelchair or on crutches, they forced me to walk on those feet, in those casts, on those boots. What their goal was to force me forward onto my toes while my feet were healing, because in their minds, they thought if they didn't do that and the casts came off after, 6 to 8 weeks of not moving, that I would fall back into the bad habits. So what they were doing is my feet, now you really think about this, because I've still got stitches in my feet under those plaster casts and bones that have been pretty much messed with. So I was in a lot of pain. They were forcing me up on those toes to rock forward as my feet were healing. It's pretty genius and risky and painful for me. But when the casts came off, my feet looked like everybody else's, except for some massive scars. And as I started to move, I found it easier to run. I went forward on my toes immediately because they'd forced me forward.
Yeah. Wow.
Pretty genius.
It kind of propelled you then.
It did.
Definitely.
Yep.
And I know in your book also you credit your adoptive parents, Valerie and is it
Ivan.
Ivan.
Yes.
Yes. And, of course, they were very instrumental in supporting you and keeping you on the right track.
They were great. Nature and nurture is quite something. I mean, I eventually met my birth parents. My birth mother was a teenager and gave me up for adoption, but she married my father a year after that. And I have 6 younger siblings. So I've found them. But the first words out of her mouth when we met was, I would never have been who I was if I'd stayed with them. Very, honest statement, brave statement. And so that's what I mean, nature and nurture. I just believe I was meant to be adopted and got those parents. And my dad, even though I couldn't do sport as a youngster, he educated me on every sport he possibly could. And rugby, cricket, horse racing, boxing. We would listen to Muhammad Ali on the radio, and Kentucky Derby. He was passionate about horse racing, so it's quite timing, the Kentucky Derby. So I had a real education on sport. He taught me a lot about it.
He was a printer, wasn't he?
Yes, he started at the New Zealand's largest newspaper, the New Zealand Herald, when he was 14 years of age as an errand boy.
So you became an avid reader as well.
He did, yes. He was a linotype operator, and many people probably wouldn't even know what that is, but, they're using the
hot type.
The hot type, and it's all in reverse. So he actually taught me how to read in reverse what he was doing.
Sure.
I mean, so yes, he was an avid reader and would bring, not only the newspaper, but they had some other publications that he would. I was reading when I was so young, So it was a great gift he gave me there, and plus the education on sport, so that when I, became a sports person myself, I had a great, foundation to work from, just knowing what it was like to compete and what it took, actually.
My guest is Anne Audain, a New Zealand native now living in Evansville. We've been talking about her induction into the World Athletics Museum. She's already a member of the U.S. Sports Hall of Fame and the New Zealand Sports Hall of Fame, and other titles here, a lot of them. Now, you were a trailblazer for women running for a paycheck, considered to be the first female professional in the sport. What was that first professional race, Anne?
It was in Portland, Oregon, June of 1981. And when I first arrived here in about end of March of 81, I heard that the rumors that the sport was going to try and turn professional because it was totally amateur. You couldn't earn a single dollar or be given free pairs of shoes or any kind of monetary compensation for running. And the road race directors here in the United States wanted to turn it professional because where their frustration was it was all under the table. People were getting paid, particularly the men, but it was all under the table. It was all hush-hush. And what was found, and actually what's interesting, is there's a documentary being made right now about that race. Because it's not being told well by our sport at all. And what people don't realize is that particular race turned track and field and the Olympic Games professional. If it wasn't for a small group of runners, Michael Jordan and the Dream Team would not have been in Barcelona. So what they did was they were frustrated because they were paying under-the-table payments to the so-called name athletes who would turn up to their race but wouldn't really perform, but they were still getting paid, whereas other runners were turning up to finish first, second, and third and not getting anything. And so the road race directors wanted a fair competition, open prize money, so that, it was media would be interested instead of keeping it all hush-hush. And so that's what they wanted. They wanted to keep the sport of road racing separate from track and field. But the governing body of track and field was wanting to harness all these people in road races and was making them all join. It was called the Athletics Congress, TAC. And they were making everybody that was participating in a road race pay a fee to TAC to be able to enter in that road race. The amateur rules back then were that if a professional raced in one of these races, every person in that race was contaminated
Oh, my.
by the professional. I mean, you talk antiquated, philosophy, whatever. So they wanted it to just make it clean and clear that road racing was going to be professional. Mm-hmm. However, as I said, road racing was still governed by the TAC and the International Amateur Athletic Federation.
A lot of bureaucracy there.
There was, and there just was. And if you just see the headlines, and as I said, there's a documentary being made, and they've got my scrapbooks of the headlines of not only United States media, but New Zealand media as well.
Mm-hmm. What was your first paycheck?
$10,000.
Really?
In 1981. And you know what? The sad part is that our sport, the 80s were wonderful, and all of us that raced and competed in the 80s will say we had the perfect decade, because our sport of road racing never really did a good job of really going fully professional. And so now you look at that year, that perfect year, when I look back and started to add up my prize money for that year, it was six figures in 1982. And now you look at those races, about 15 of them. Some of them don't exist. Some of them have the same prize money as they did in 1982. Some of them have less prize money or none. So the sport went backwards. So no athlete of coming in now to the United States to race like I did in 1982 can have that career.
We're talking about the 40th anniversary of the perfect year in Anne Audain's running life. Was it a perfect year personally for you off the track?
Yeah, I mean, it was one of those where you go, okay, you could live with this year, you could retire, and you've done it. You made it. You never thought that you would get to this level, because I'd quit the sport at one point at the end of 1980 out of many frustrations. So you just look at that and you go, well, okay, that's it. It's not going to get any better than that. But I had another 10 years and a successful 10 years. And heck, what am I going to say? Another 2 Olympics and another Commonwealth Games medal and many more road race victories. So I got another 10 years and retired at 36. Never would have dreamed that, let alone 22 years out of those feet.
Wow.
And I'm still fine. I'm still out there running and walking every day. So trying to anyway.
And Anne, you're now on the speaking circuit, inspiring others with your life story. Where have you been speaking, Anne?
Well, to be honest, David, nowhere for 2 years.
A lot of people are saying that.
Nowhere for 2 years. I did recently do a keynote in Minneapolis, my first in 2 years, and was a little bit out of practice. But no, I mean, there were no running events for 2 years. There were COVID, shut everybody down.
So what's your message when you go to these events?
It depends on the audience. A lot of times my audience are not runners. It's nothing to do with the running. And so I try to tailor it to the audience and what the company is. And so a lot of it's about patience and perseverance, overcoming odds.
Your life story.
Yeah. You can use it in so many different ways. A lot of it's been in the past as schools, because I'm a former school teacher, so that's always a neat ones to do. But it is a story that can be used in many, many different ways. So I just see what the audience is, and
well, I'm sure there were times when you were really down, and then you had to fire yourself up.
Yes, and it's you look back on it, and I forget where I was recently, and somebody's just asking, well, how did you keep on going and not? It's easy to turn around and be a victim of a lot of things versus saying, okay, well, that happened, but I'm not going to let it, determine who I am, or certainly reflect on who I become. So I did. The first 10 years was tough, but I think it made me really tough for the second 10 years, or 11 actually, 11 and 11. So 11 years as an amateur, 11 years under a coach that was very, very rough, and he was just very erratic, never had a plan, very dogmatic, very rude, could be a very nasty person. And a lot of those, also the bureaucracy of the sport, where you had basically very male-dominated administration in the sport in New Zealand, and making it very tough for you to make teams. You'd do the standards, and then they'd make it tougher, and it was just almost a matter of control over the female athletes. And so that first 11 years was tough, but I think my desire to run just kept overcoming a lot of it, until it got really bad in 1980 with the Olympic boycott, very rough times with my first coach, and just not seeing where the opportunities were, because the longest distance for women then was only 1,500 metres in the Olympic Games. Mm-hmm. I mean, who knew that my talent was going to be at all these other longer distances, because they weren't available. So I quit. Mm-hmm. And
but you were in the Montreal Games, right?
I was, yes. 20 years of age in 1976.
And, of course, that was and the next one would be the Moscow Games, which were canceled.
Yes.
Were you hoping to go to Moscow then?
Yes, I'd qualified for Moscow, but Moscow was canceled before the New Zealand team.
What was your reaction to that? What was the reaction of your fellow athletes?
Well, New Zealand had already been through experiencing a boycott. In 1976, all the African nations boycotted Montreal over New Zealand's stance with South Africa.
Okay.
New Zealand was still playing rugby with and cricket with South Africa.
Because of
apartheid era. Mm-hmm. And so going to Montreal, all the black African nations had already arrived in Montreal and were told to pack their bags and go home. So I was on the other side of that, watching these athletes have to pack up and go home. And so then you had the Moscow boycott over Afghanistan, but then you got to Los Angeles in 1984, and you had the Eastern Bloc boycott just to pay back for 1980. So that's 3 Olympic Games in a row where politics
definitely
got involved, and so I was involved with those 3.
It's still involved now.
I know.
With the Russian athletes being being excluded from certain events.
Well, but they were what a lot of people don't realize, the Russian athletes have been excluded from the last 2 Olympics over doping.
Right.
So they've been done. They're so it's not just what's going on with Ukraine. They were done for the last 2 Olympics over their sophisticated doping system.
Now, your audiences that you speak to when you're back on the circuit, mostly female audiences?
Nope.
Really?
No. Mixture. The one in Minneapolis was actually predominantly men.
Really? Okay. There we go. So what's been the feedback when you go to these events? What do people ask you questions about?
Well, a lot of the times there aren't question and answers just because of time allocation. I think the main one is, how on earth did you keep on going? I mean, the sports psychology of it. I mean, there's always an interest in the sports psychology because now it's more out in the open. So many female athletes are speaking out about dealing with their coaches. Administration. You just saw the United States women's soccer team have a big win in terms of equality. A lot of it's out in the open now. So, I experienced that too. But now it's being spoken about and there's accountability.
Of course, the young female athletes in the
gymnastics.
I mean, that just was terrible.
That's in contrast. I mean, you just started listening to all that.
Oh my gosh!
And you really, just in my small experience in New Zealand of dealing with administration, where they were never on your side as a female athlete, And to see that this was allowed to occur, and I mean allowed to occur, there were people who knew this was going on, but for the sake of whatever, money, the status in the world, and I mean, USA Gymnastics.
Well, that's why these young women were afraid to come forward, because nobody would believe them, or they would just not do anything about it.
Well, and they were desperate to keep their positions.
Sure. Yeah, they put all that time and effort into it.
Absolutely. So as soon as you speak out, what are you going to be? Told that you're not. I know I saw that happen just in my world. You speak out, you start to speak out against some of these people, and they have retribution. And so they were afraid of that, because there's always, another dozen more coming up behind. Easy to say, well, particularly with the standard of gymnastics in this country, one of those on the team speaks out, another dozen waiting in line to take her place.
True. Okay, let's move on to Boise, Idaho. Kind of your home away from home. You love Boise.
I did, yes. I chose Boise. I spent the first 3 years in the United States in Denver, and just really wanted a quieter environment. More like New Zealand, to be able to go and train. So I got introduced to Boise and went there in 1984 before the 84 Olympics. And that was my USA base for all those years. And just a beautiful city and great environment for running. And then when I retired in 92, I got asked to bring a big event to Boise, because it just had some small local races, maybe 500, 1,000 people. They wanted a bigger event because Portland, Oregon had a huge event, Spokane, Washington, big events, Salt Lake City, all the surrounding states had massive road races, and Boise didn't. So at that point, I realized that so many women in their 40s, 50s, and 60s were not participating in the big road races. You had the elites and some younger local, but the 40s, 50s, 60s were not participating. And I thought, what about creating an event that's welcoming for all ages, shapes, and sizes?
Target that huge audience.
Yes. And so I built a 5K, because 3 miles, 5K is very achievable for anybody, and it was nothing to do with competition or running
a fun run.
It was a fun run. A celebration is what we called it.
Yeah.
The Women's Fitness Celebration. And first year we had 2,400 women, second year 5,200, and third year 9,000. And in 7 or 8 years, we built it to the number one women's race in the country at 17,000. And so it stayed a women's event for 20 years. But through that time, women started to participate in such overwhelming numbers in road races that you didn't need a women's only event anymore, because women were now making up 54% of road races. So 10 years ago, we switched it to 5K, 10K, and half marathon, very family-oriented and mixed.
And that could just show you what an event like that, how it can grow and become an economic engine for a community.
Absolutely. Now, it was taken over from me by the big hospital. So Boise has 2 major hospitals like we do here. And so one of them took it over and became the title sponsor with its name on it. And they raised money. They used the money raised for the Children's Hospital and to build running tracks at all schools, as many as they can. So that's what they're using it for. And so it's they've built now the last 2 years. It's been shut down. So this year in September will be the first year back as an in-person event. Prior to the COVID, they'd built it back up. It dwindled on the women's side down to 8,000 for the very reason I said. Women didn't need an all-women's race anymore. But they had now built it back up to 14,000, 15,000 prior COVID. So thank goodness it's going to come back this year. So
now let's get back to the running situation here in Evansville. Roberts Park, of course, that's the site of the former Roberts Stadium. You have some thoughts on what you'd like to see at Roberts Park. Let's go ahead and make a pitch for that, Anne.
Well, I labelled, I've been in Evansville 25 years, and I first was interviewed by, I believe, Randy Beard with the newspaper all those years ago, and I labelled Evansville the most fitness-unfriendly city that I could have ended up in. And I love every part of Evansville. I really like living in this size city in the United States, so I absolutely love it. But I am so frustrated with the lack of walking and hiking and running trails that, non-sidewalk, non-pavement, no roads, to get onto some trails. And so with the state hospital, I started with that. I sat on the Greenway Passage committee for about 12 years and just got so frustrated with the cost. The $1 million a mile took so long. I've traveled. I've been in every state in the United States except North Dakota. I have seen communities build trails all over this country, and was so frustrated with why it was taking so long to do something like that here. And the state hospital, I encouraged them to build the gravel trail that exists there, which is barely 400 meters long. And I got that done, hoping that people in the Parks Department and in the mayor's office, I've now been through a few mayors, so every single one of them has heard from me, that you don't need to build state-of-the-art pavement trails everywhere. They can be crushed stone, just like that trail at the state hospital. And I hope that would encourage. So now we're looking at Roberts Stadium. How long has it been since that stadium has been torn down? You've got that big open piece of land now being added to by the former golf course at Wisselman's. Mm-hmm. And they're sitting there. There's all this green space, and all you hear is the amount of money it's going to cost, state of the art. And I've seen the plans for the park at Roberts Stadium. And my comment, I come from a country that is beautiful. They've got trails everywhere, and they keep to simplicity. All you need at that land at Roberts Park is to plant tons of trees and have a gravel trail around the perimeter and maybe crisscross it.
Mm-hmm. That sounds pretty simple.
It's simple.
And it doesn't sound very costly.
Just plant some trees and put a crushed stone trail. And it freaks me out sometimes when I hear these people starting to, we're going to do this, and we're going to have a dog park, and we're going to, have all these other amenities. It's like, no, keep it pure and simple. And then my other frustration, Wisselman Woods. Do you know there's a speed limit in Wisselman's Woods? You are not allowed to run in Wisselman's Nature Centre. Has been like that for years and years. And you think how many people, if you opened up the Wisselman's Nature Centre for runners prior to 8 o'clock in the morning, and they all paid their annual fee and they could get in there and run those trails prior to the general public getting in there, all the school kids and so forth. You mean Westmont Park? No, the Nature Centre.
The Nature Centre, okay.
Yes, the trails in the Nature Centre. Mm-hmm. You're not allowed to run in there.
Okay.
So all I'm saying is it's just like you're handicapped in this town in terms of being encouraged to run and walk and stroll, because there's no safe place. You're out on the city streets. The Y with its Team 13 and trying to encourage people to run. They're all out on the city streets on Saturday mornings. It's not safe. And if you think about it, you got the State Hospital Park, the bridge over the Lloyd, then you got Circle, Roberts Park, and then move on to the other park, Wisselman's and so forth. All those people could be training for Team 13 without being on a city street.
Good point. Anne Audain, world-class runner, a member of the World Athletics Museum, all kinds of titles. Thank you for being my guest on 2 Main Street. And as we always say, Annie, keep running. Annie, run. Annie, run. And I know you still like to run.
I do. I'm getting slow and older, but I still think running and walking is the most cost-effective healthcare that we have.
Well, thank you
so
so
much. So I'm still trying to do it.
Okay. Anne Audain, my guest on 2 Main Street. 2 Main Street is presented by Jeffrey Berger, Kim Wren, and the Berger Wealth Team at Bayard Private Wealth Management. Thanks, Anne.
Thank you, David.
Welcome back to 2 Main Street. I'm David James, and joining me now is Megan Craven with the YMCA of Southwestern Indiana. She's the Health Initiative Director and Special Events Coordinator. Now, we just talked to former Olympian Anne Audain about her career as a distance runner, and Megan is here to tell us about the local running scene and staying fit, running, jogging, or just walking, and also advice to someone who wants to get started preparing for that very first race. So the YMCA has a race series. Tell us about that, Megan.
Absolutely. So it is our first race. It's 3 races that lead into our half marathon. That first one is our 5K, 10K. We run them simultaneously. So if a 5K is more of your start, that's great. Or you can do a 10K. That leads into our second race, which is in September. That's our 15K. So we're building our distance to the half marathon, which is that first weekend in October for that 13.1 miles.
Are you a runner?
I was. I've had a child, so I'm easing back into it. But actually, for Mother's Day, I got a gift certificate to get some new shoes, so I'm getting back into it.
Well, good for you. Good for you. Now the 5K on the runway. That seems like a special event.
Yes, we no longer do that event. We hope to bring it back. We took a pause with COVID, but we hope to see that back in the future.
And that's the Evansville Regional Airport runway.
Correct. So it's a nice, long, straight run. Very easy, very flat, but a great place to start.
Now, you also have training programs for
Absolutely.
runners.
Yes. So we have our program called Jumpstart. That is, you've heard those Couch to 5K programs. It's very similar to that. Starts at 1 mile, and over 7 weeks, we work up to 3.1 miles, which is a 5K. So 7 weeks, every pace can start. You're not too slow, and I promise you're not too fast either. We've got all paces. And that leads into our next program called Team 13, and that starts at 3 miles, and we work up to that 13.1 miles, and that gets you to the half marathon. That's 13 weeks of training, 3 days a week, and it is really a wonderful program.
This is at the YMCA of Southwestern Indiana.
Correct.
Now, these major events, the marathon, the half marathon, and all those events, you have some great runners coming in town.
Absolutely. They come to our race because, this is our 19th year of running this race. And it's a mainstay, always in that October time, usually good weather, but it's a great race.
So how many people are involved in this race?
So we usually have about 1,500 to 2,000 participants, and then it takes almost 500 volunteers or more to make that race possible.
And the course?
The course runs through the highlights of Evansville. So we actually are bringing back an older route and adding in some new spots. Hopefully we'll see some Haney's Corner in there, and look at all of our parks that we are blessed with here in Evansville, like Garvin Park and all of some of the pocket parks that we have as well.
A lot of logistics involved in setting up this race, of course.
Oh, my goodness. We start the day the race ends on planning for the next year, working with our sponsors and partners, and then just how we can improve. What are some changes we need, and things that we need to make the race even better the next year.
Let's learn more about Megan Craven. So where did you grow up, Megan?
I grew up here in Evansville. I went to North High School. And yeah, this has been my home. I tried to get away, but I came right back.
Understand you're an avid golfer?
Yeah.
Did your golfing career start at North High School?
It did, and that was before they had all those championship rings. But John Cio was my coach,
really?
which kind of started that process. So yeah, I played at North, and actually that's what took me out of town. I played golf at Ball State for 4 years, and really enjoyed my time. I don't get to quite play as much, but if you ever need a fourth on a scramble team, I'm your gal.
So you consider yourself a competitive golfer then?
Yes, I have played in Women's City, which is probably the only tournament I can keep up with right now, and I hope to play this year. We'll see.
Of course, the Y has a long list of wellness programs for all ages. You want to talk about those?
Absolutely. We have our Y is so big. We have so many offerings, and for every person, every age. So if you're really invested in getting your family active, we have programs like Healthy Weight in Your Child, which is a family approach to a lifestyle change. If your kids want some training, we've got some base programs building activity through exercise, and that is a one-on-one training program, all the way to specialty programs, Live Strong, which is for cancer survivors, and then we also have group exercise classes. We have STEM activities as well. I mean, we offer everything at the Y.
So how'd you get involved with the Y?
Long story.
Good.
In Muncie, Indiana, where I lived after I graduated, I got involved at the Y there. Really loved it, really enjoyed it. When I moved back to Evansville, that was the first place I went. I thought, I found such a community at their YMCA. I'm sure I can find one here. And I grew up not being a member. After I joined, I became a cycling instructor, and I went to the group exercise instructor, and the manager, and I said, there is ever a job at the Y. I want to work here. Not even a couple weeks later, a job came open in the special events department. And at that time, I was an avid runner, and I was running a lot of half marathons, and I thought, this is where I need to be.
So the whole objective of the Y is to have a wellness impact on the community.
Yep, absolutely.
And people stay fit and healthy.
Yes, in body, mind, and spirit. So for some people, we really understand getting on that treadmill, getting those miles in, but we also offer so much more.
Mm-hmm. Now, what's your advice? Okay, we're talking about a local running scene.
Sure.
Somebody says, okay, I would like to try that, but I'm intimidated by getting with all these really good runners. So how do you get that start? How do you get that spark?
That showing up is the hardest part, period. That is my best advice. Sometimes walking into the gym, the hardest part is parking that car and walking in, or showing up to a new group, like our Run Walk 812 group. It is a group that meets every day that are during the off season of Team 13 and Jumpstart, and just connecting with people. Showing up is hard, and connecting. Once you make that connection, you know, especially in the running and walking community, you know that someone the next week is going to say, where were you? You weren't here. We loved talking to you last week. We love getting to know you. Keep coming back. Really building that community and the connection.
So it's a social thing.
Absolutely. I mean, that's why I played golf. I mean, you get to play a sport and talk at the same time. Running and walking is the same way.
Well, Megan Craven, a fitness advocate at the YMCA of Southwest Indiana, thanks for being my guest on 2 Main Street. And of course, I guess our goal is to get people out there and get them active.
Absolutely. So if you have any questions, reach out to the Y. Ask for me by name. I would love to talk to any of you who are interested in getting active in any part of the Y.
Megan Craven, thanks for being my guest. I'm David James, and this is 2 Main Street, presented by Jeffrey Berger, Kim Wren, and the Berger Wealth Services team at Bayard Private Wealth Management.